A community can begin by refusing corruption. It becomes dangerous when everyone outside starts to look contaminated. In 1947, a cave near the Dead Sea returned the remains of such a world. According to the story told afterward, a young Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into the darkness. Instead of hearing it strike the ground, he heard pottery break. Inside were tall clay jars. Some were empty. Others held bundles of darkened leather wrapped in decaying cloth. The first cave eventually yielded 7 ancient scrolls. In the years that followed, Bedouin searchers and archaeologists recovered fragments of nearly 1,000 manuscripts from caves around Qumran. Biblical books, hymns, laws governing food, property, speech, and punishment. Instructions for a final war between the children of light and the children of darkness. These were not random scraps left by passing travelers. Someone had preserved an entire way of seeing the world. And at the center of that world stood a brutal division: the pure inside, and almost everyone else outside. Beside the caves stood the ruins of a settlement, rooms suited to communal life, large water installations, rows of pottery, a cemetery stretching beyond the buildings. Ancient writers had also described a Jewish movement whose members shared property, ate regulated meals, practiced ritual washing, and submitted to strict discipline. They called them the Essenes. The pieces appeared to lock together. The settlement belonged to the people who kept the scrolls. The scrolls preserved the laws of the people described by ancient writers. Therefore, the vanished community at Qumran must have been Essene. It became the story repeated in museums, documentaries, and books. There was only one problem. Across hundreds of manuscripts and thousands of surviving fragments, the people behind the scrolls never called themselves Essenes. They used other names: the community, the many, the sons of light, the men of perfect holiness. The identification may still be correct. The similarities are substantial. But the name itself was supplied by outsiders. Before we decide who these people were, we need to see what belonging among them actually required. What a man surrendered when he entered. What happened when he broke a rule. And why a shared meal could determine whether he remained part of the light. The Essenes did not simply move away from society, they placed society on trial. Jerusalem's temple still stood. Priests still offered sacrifices. Pilgrims crowded its courtyards during festivals. Yet some Jewish groups believed the sacred center had been compromised, its leadership illegitimate, its calendar corrupted, its boundaries handled by the wrong hands. Leaving became a verdict. The Jewish historian Josephus described the Essenes alongside the Pharisees and Sadducees as one of the major Jewish schools of his time. Philo of Alexandria claimed that thousands lived across Judea. Pliny the Elder located an Essene community near the western shore of the Dead Sea. Their accounts describe men who surrendered private property, received food and clothing from common stores, and placed daily life beneath communal authority. At sunrise, there were prayers, then labor. Later came ritual washing, clean garments, and a meal that no one could touch before a priest pronounced a blessing. When the meal ended, the garments were removed and work resumed. Every ordinary action carried a boundary. Who was clean enough to enter? Who could sit near the priest? Who could touch the food? And who had to remain outside? This was no peaceful gathering of desert philosophers. It was a disciplined system with supervisors, ranks, examinations, and exclusion. Still, the Essenes were not one perfectly uniform institution. Ancient sources placed them in towns and villages, as well as near the desert. Josephus even mentions an Essene gate in Jerusalem. Marriage divided them too. He says one branch rejected it, fearing that desire and family loyalty would weaken devotion to the group. Another branch married and tested prospective wives for fertility. The familiar picture of a single celibate monastery is therefore too simple. What united these communities was not one address. It was the conviction that holiness required separation, and that separation had to be maintained through the smallest details of life. A cup could be shared only with the right person. Water purified only the obedient. A meal could become proof that you still belonged. The cost becomes clearest when a stranger arrives and asks to sit at the table. For the first year, the newcomer ate alone. According to Josephus, he followed the community's discipline but remained outside full membership. He could live like them without yet living among them. If he endured, he was permitted to approach the ritual water. The communal meal remained closed. Then came 2 more years of examination. His conduct was watched, his character was judged, his property weighted beyond his control. Only after passing these stages could he swear to honor God, practice justice, obey the community's authorities, conceal its teachings from outsiders, and preserve its books and the names of its angels. The community rule, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, describes a strikingly similar system of admission, ranking, shared property, examination, and discipline. It never calls its members Essenes, but inside its rules, belonging becomes measurable. Each man occupies a position. Priests take precedence. Decisions pass before an assembly called the Many. A person can move higher or lower according to conduct. At the communal table, that invisible ranking becomes physical. The priest reaches for the bread first. Everyone else waits. The rules also record how easily a person could fall, interrupt another member repeatedly, laugh at the wrong moment, fall asleep during the assembly, spit in front of the gathering, expose the body carelessly, speak before someone of higher rank. The punishment might last 10 days, 30 days, 6 months, or a year. Food could be reduced. Access to communal purity could be suspended. For serious offenses, a member could be expelled. Josephus describes the expelled man trapped by the vows he had taken. He could no longer eat ordinary food outside the community, yet the community would not receive him. Some approached starvation before being readmitted. This is where discipline becomes something heavier. The group controlled more than belief. It could determine who ate, who spoke, who washed, and who remained recognizable as one of the pure. The stepped pools found at Qumran are often interpreted as ritual baths. But the scrolls insist that water alone cannot cleanse someone who rejects the community's law. A man could descend every step. He could immerse his entire body. He could emerge with water running from his hair and clothing and still be declared unclean. The boundary was never held by water. It was held by obedience. The community did not believe its discipline existed only to improve daily life. History was moving toward a division. One side belonged to light, the other belonged to darkness. The War Scroll describes a vast final conflict involving the sons of light, hostile nations, armies, priests, trumpets, banners, and angelic powers. Battle formations are specified. Inscriptions are assigned to weapons. Priests stand behind the fighting lines and direct the sacred rhythm of war. This is not a loose dream of apocalypse. It reads like liturgy and military planning forced onto the same sheet of leather. The enemy included foreign powers, often associated by scholars with Rome. But the darkness was not confined to Rome. Other Jewish groups could stand on the wrong side. Priests serving in Jerusalem could stand on the wrong side. Anyone following a corrupted calendar or rejecting the community's interpretation could become part of the disorder God was expected to destroy. The map of humanity narrowed. Inside were the faithful remnant, outside, nearly everyone else. It is easy to mock this from a safe distance. Then the mechanism becomes familiar. A group begins with a real grievance. Leaders are corrupt. Institutions protect themselves. Sacred words are used to excuse ambition. Walking away may be an act of conscience, but isolation changes the sound of disagreement. When every outsider confirms that the world is impure, criticism no longer feels like information. It feels like contamination. Doubt becomes betrayal. Obedience begins to resemble evidence of goodness. The community near Qumran may have been preparing for divine judgment while Roman power tightened around Judea. In 66 CE, revolt erupted. Roman legions crushed resistance across the region. Archaeological evidence indicates that Qumran was destroyed around 68 CE. Its inhabitants disappear from the site. Perhaps manuscripts were carried into the caves as danger approached. Perhaps some had already been stored there. Perhaps refugees brought material from elsewhere. We do not know who hid every scroll. We know only that someone believed the texts were worth protecting when the settlement itself could no longer be saved. The traditional explanation remains persuasive. Ancient writers describe the Essenes. Qumran reveals a disciplined settlement. The scrolls preserve the laws and expectations of a separatist Jewish community. Many scholars still consider some version of the Essene connection the strongest explanation. But the evidence refuses to become a confession. The scrolls contain many kinds of writing, produced and copied across generations. Some speak in the voice of a closed community. Others are biblical manuscripts, prayers, calendars, legal arguments, and works that may have circulated far beyond Qumran. Then there is the cemetery. The popular image presents an isolated settlement of celibate men. Most of the identified burials are male, but women and children have also been found, and scholars continue to dispute what those graves mean. The contradiction does not destroy the Essene hypothesis. It prevents the hypothesis from becoming certainty. Still, we keep reaching for the name. A named community feels understandable. It can be placed on a timeline, given a doctrine, and assigned a beginning and an end. An unnamed community remains loose. Its members might have disagreed. Its library might have come from several places. Its boundaries may have shifted. The clean story begins to fracture. That discomfort says something about us. We do not merely recover the past, we pressure it into recognizable shapes. A broken bowl becomes evidence of a communal meal. A stepped pool becomes evidence of ritual purity. A cemetery becomes evidence for or against celibacy. Each object is asked to identify people who can no longer answer. The people of Qumran may have been Essenes. They may have represented one severe branch of a broader Essene movement. They may have been closely related without being identical. The honest answer remains unfinished, and perhaps that is the point. The same people who divided humanity into named camps, light and darkness, pure and impure, members and outsiders, have left us fighting over which name should contain them. The Essenes disappeared from history as a named movement. Rome destroyed Jerusalem and its temple in 70 CE. The Jewish world that had produced Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, rebels, priests, prophets, and desert communities was violently rearranged. The scrolls remained in the caves, leather dried, cloth decayed, jars cracked, names vanished. What survived was a human experiment. People looked at a compromised society and decided that participation had become intolerable. They shared wealth, controlled appetite, subjected themselves to discipline, and tried to make holiness visible in the smallest actions. There is something admirable in that refusal. They would not pretend that corruption became sacred merely because it wore priestly clothing. But they carried a dangerous assumption into the desert, that evil could be placed safely outside the boundary. Once the world had been divided into light and darkness, purity required constant inspection. A careless gesture mattered, a misplaced word mattered, the wrong calendar mattered, The wrong meal, body, teacher, or interpretation could threaten the whole. The wall protecting the community had to keep moving inward. That pattern did not vanish with Qumran. It appears whenever a group decides that disagreement proves moral contamination. A political movement begins removing traitors and eventually finds them in every room. A family protects its reputation until honesty itself becomes disloyal. A religious community guards the sacred so aggressively that frightened people learn to hide ordinary human failure. The language changes. The structure survives. The Essenes may have understood something the rest of society refused to admit. Institutions can become corrupt while continuing to perform every ceremony correctly. But their answer exposes another danger. You can leave the institution without leaving its hunger for control. You can reject its hierarchy and build a harsher one. You can walk into the desert to escape a divided world and redraw the same division around your table. Nothing disappears without a trace. The caves preserved more than scripture. They preserved the moment when the desire to live cleanly began turning into fear of everyone outside. That is why the missing name matters. We may never know exactly who hid those scrolls, but we still recognize the wall they were building, because people are building it now.